Hi, I'm Neutrali. I discuss and compare older games for DOS and Windows. Today, I've got an interesting and very particular genre here for you. Like in my very first video, we're gonna talk about a few puzzle games. But this time, there are platforms involved. Ooh! What's interesting here is that these 2D side view games seem to get better and better the further back in time we go, at least in my opinion. We're gonna be talking about Daisy's Garden 2, Lode Runner, The Legend Returns, and Jetpack. There's also a more modern example here that may or may not really fit into this particular category. What is a puzzle platformer? Let's get into it. We have to start with the basics, and for our purposes, this example right here establishes the bare minimum. Daisy's Garden 2, henceforth DG2, is a self-published game by Frank Burkhardt made in 1996 for Windows 3.1x, NT 3.5x, and Windows 95. It's the successor to the original 1995 release. Based on this screenshot and a few comments online, it seems to have been very similar, albeit with less polished graphics. This is a German game. Daisy's Garden 2 is a single-player, kid-friendly, non-violent game where the goal is to guide our protagonist Daisy to collect all fruits, flowers, and vegetables on the level and reach the exit. It features sound and music and supports keyboard and mouse controls. The developer calls it a think and run game. Being kid-friendly doesn't mean that the game is particularly easy though, and I don't think the game is accessible to them as Frank might have hoped it to be. We'll talk more about that a little later. So, puzzle platformers try to combine puzzle and platforming games, right? You've got problem solving mixed with action elements that test your reflexes. DG2 establishes the basic building blocks of all of our older puzzle platformers in this video. In these games, the main goal or puzzle of a level is usually twofold. First, you need to collect all treasure in the level, after which an exit will open up. Then, you need to actually reach the exit in one piece to complete the level. In DG2, the exit is, in an almost whimsical fashion, the highest point in the level. Another common feature here are, of course, enemies. I'd argue that having to deal with threats in real time is one of the main things separating these games from pure puzzle games. Even in the placid, peaceful environments of the gardens, there are those who want nothing more than to see you fail, as touching them will cost you a life and restart the level. DG2 has three types of enemies: moles, grubs, and marmots. Moles are static threats that pop in and out of the ground. Grubs slowly move back and forth and are usually just a minor speed bump. Marmots, however, are assholes. They will immediately sprint at you if you come too close and can easily chase you into a corner if you're not careful. No. Luckily, you can dig in front of them to momentarily trap them. Speaking of digging, this was the main mechanic I wanted all of our games this time to include. Digging in these games is a way to bypass obstacles, deal with enemies, and manage verticality. Daisy can't jump, however. She can only climb ladders, meaning that it is really simple to trap yourself if you dig willy-nilly. You see, you can only dig the ground directly in front or behind you, not underneath you. Let's use the term turf to describe the various kinds of surfaces the player traverses. DG2 has only one basic type of turf, simply called ground. The only other type of turf is water, but you can't traverse it, so it doesn't really count. The levels also contain ladders and lifts, which are the main way to reach elevated areas, and ropes, which allow for controlled descent and bypassing enemies. One thing that kinda rattled me was how fences and bushes work. Walking past these does nothing, but dropping down onto them costs you a life. It took me a while to realize that the reason I kept having to restart a level was because apparently I kept breaking my neck over a gentle tumble into a shrubbery. The levels can also feature a few special items that activate immediately when you walk over them. There are keys that let you open matching doors, blocking your path. There's garlic, which drives away the marmot. No. There are magic mushrooms, which render Daisy invisible to enemies for a short duration. There's also spinach, which, rather redundantly, gives you more time to complete the level. Items will be a reoccurring feature in the other games as well. The game was a commercial shareware release. The shareware version only allows for playing the first 6 levels in a garden file, which are essentially level packs in file format. You're also restricted to editing only 3 levels in these files in the shareware version. The version I have came with several level packs, totaling around 140 levels. Because of the level editor though, you'd basically never really run out of gardens, provided you made your own or downloaded those of others. That's another common feature, by the way. All of our games here have level editors. Look at this though. See how a large part of the map is sorta unused? I found that a little curious and tried loading the final level of my current level pack. It was the same thing, with only a part of the maximum space used. It occurred to me that there might be some sort of technical limitation in the way of that, but I wasn't going to comb through each and every level to disprove that. Once I fired up the level editor though, I found out that it was indeed possible to create and fill out larger levels. As the developer himself explains, there is no special ending when and if you complete the final level of each pack. The game just ends with little fanfare. Not that I ever bothered to finish a single level pack though. I got through 10 levels before I started to feel kinda tired. You see, there are several things eating at my enjoyment of the game. First of all, let me introduce you to the reoccurring arch sin of all of these games, invisible turf. You will invariably come across turf that you will pass right through. Frank, listen. Adults don't find these sort of tricks entertaining or engaging. I think children will find them even less so. I say this with the knowledge that the earlier games we have here also had this kind of bullshit present. So you could have done things differently, my dude. That's all I'm saying. I guess it's ultimately up to the level designer how much of an asshole they want to be though. Secondly, the game features time limits, often quite strict ones. This is where the think and run aspect comes into play. You're expected to first plot your route in your mind, and then simply execute it. But guess what? The invisible turf renders this completely meaningless. You cannot account for a route that in reality is quite impossible. It's trial and error all the way through. Thirdly, you can trap yourself. It's easy to literally paint, or dig in this case, yourself into a corner and watch in horror as the turf starts to reform around you, eventually crushing the life out of poor Daisy. Becoming trapped can also occur through no fault of your own. You might simply fall down into an area with no way out. A quiet F you, straight from the level designer. There's very little information available on the game online. You used to be able to get it via Frank's personal site, but he's repurposed that into a more professional front lacking any references to Daisy's Garden. Archive.org has at least 3 versions according to the descriptions, but they all appear to be shareware builds. I found the full game at a YouTube channel of all places. You don't actually have to bother Ultimzer though. As I was writing this script, Eric and the gang at dosgame.at asked Frank for permission to host the full version at their site, from where you can freely download it. Shout out to the crew at dosgame.at for their fantastic contribution to game preservation, and kudos to Frank for allowing everyone the chance to enjoy Daisy's Garden. Interestingly, there also seems to be an open source remake in the works, but I'm unsure of its current status. Links available in the description. Daisy's Garden 2 is an interesting example of a puzzle platformer reduced to its base components, which does get rather repetitive fairly quickly due to its simple, straightforward nature. So, now that we have a better picture of the kinds of games we're dealing with, let's move on to a game that might have inspired many of the features and mechanics of DG2.
Phew! Fiera!
Lode Runner, The Legend Returns, henceforth TLR, was made by Presage Software and published by Sierra Online in 1994 for DOS, Windows, Mac OS, and Sega Saturn. It was also ported to the PlayStation in 1998. The game is a sequel to the original Lode Runner, which came out all the way back in 1983 for the Apple II. The award-winning game is very much a direct upgrade to DG2, even though it came out 2 years prior. And when I say upgrade, I mean Daisy's Garden is basically a carbon copy of Lode Runner with the serial numbers filed off. You are bounty hunter Jake Peril, who aims to infiltrate the treasuries of the greedy rulers of the evil empire to steal back their ill-gotten gains. You can control Jake either via the keyboard or a joystick. The game has sound and a set of rather pleasant music tracks, although I had to run the setup utility before those started working properly. The game also supports head-to-head hot seat multiplayer, with player 2 taking on the role of Wes Reckless. Jake is armed with a laser blaster, which functions exactly the same as digging in DG2. Unlike in DG2, you can also dig with bombs and boss bombs, and you can carry several of the former at one time. Just like Daisy, Jake is utterly incapable of jumping. We now have 2 games that are classified as platformers where you cannot jump. I am aware of the irony. The goal is, again, to collect everything and reach the exit, except that this time we're collecting actual treasure instead of stuff you can find in the garden. Usually the exit appears somewhere in the level, other times it might be behind a locked door. We only have one enemy type this time, the undead Mad Monks. They all act the same way, attempting to make a beeline toward your position. Getting caught by one triggers a surprisingly gruesome animation. If you can trap the monks in pits, you can quickly walk over them. You can pull off a risky maneuver where you run on top of a monk to get past it. The Mad Monks also have a bad habit of stealing treasure, which they will drop if they lose their balance. There's a massive total of 150 levels, or puzzles as the game calls them, in TLR. And I gotta say, it does feel like the game makes a serious effort to provide your money's worth for the $50 it would have cost back in the day. And then again, that's $100 in today's economy, so make of that what you will. I never actually owned a copy of TLR back in the day, and my only opportunity to play it was at a friend's house. Unlike in DG2, however, when you try to warp to a specific level, the game immediately throws this overly sensitive warning in your face.
If you choose this option, your score will reset with each level. Are you sure you want to do this?
With all due respect, Sierra. F*** off. Basically, the only way to maintain your score is to either start from the very beginning or load a specific save. I can't really fathom the reason behind such a blatantly player-hostile design choice. Sorry TLR, despite your pretty graphics, fancy animations and wealth of content, DG2 has you beat here. In DG2, beginning a new run or losing all of your lives resets your score, but you can start at any level you want. In TLR, losing all of your lives boots you straight back to level 1, but you can at least save and load your progress. Compared to DG2's items that operated more like power-ups, TLR's items are under manual control. You got stuff like bombs, slime, snares, drills, and even bug befuddlement gas. The items are generally designed to either interact with the mad bunks or with turf. Frustratingly, many of the game's items spread across the game's 10 biomes are only introduced when you reach them. This means that many of the mechanics that the items introduce are basically gate-kept behind potentially hours and hours of playtime, unless you want that constant score reset. Combine these two level and item related design choices and you end up with a game that actively punishes you for trying to experience all it has to offer. I mean, instead of having a linear sequence of levels, wouldn't it have made more sense to let the player start from any biome and let them progress in a sort of decision tree where mechanics combine wherever the leaf nodes intersect? Just an idea. I made it through 26 levels before the monotony finally got to me. TLR has two kinds of turf, regular and bedrock. Bedrock is our introduction to indestructible terrain, and in this game it can only be destroyed with the jackhammer item. Turf can also be covered in tar, slowing down anyone who attempts to cross. Invisible turf also makes a return here, bringing with it the trial and error guesswork that it is known for. When it comes to other sins, TLR does away with time limits. Great! In their place, however, it introduces another far more insidious sin: buried treasure. You see, in some levels the treasure you need to collect isn't immediately visible, and you're advised to locate them by, quote,
blasting about in a random frenzy.
I wish I was kidding. This is straight from the manual. This is another intentionally dumb design choice that introduces an unnecessary transient element of randomness into the game. Lode Runner giveth, and Lode Runner taketh away. You can't actually find TLR on any store platforms these days, as it's abandonware. You can, however, find it on many sites that deal with that sort of stuff, free of charge. Despite the clumsy design choices it has, it's pretty good, honestly, and a lot of thought clearly went into designing the puzzles. The enhanced edition, called Lode Runner Online: The Mad Monk's Revenge, came out in 1995 and includes several new features. If you want to try Lode Runner, that's probably the version I recommend hunting down. Go give it a try. Now, going back further in time, this next game is the oldest game in our lineup. It's also one of the best in my opinion, because it provides us with a degree of freedom when dealing with the level layout. Jetpack was made by Adam Peterson and published by Software Creations in 1993. It's a classic puzzle platformer where you collect precious gems before making your exit. The game supports keyboard and joystick controls and has sound but no music. If you will excuse my language, I played the shit out of this game back in the day, and even went as far as making custom levels with my friend and playing them together. In Jetpack, to quote the help section, You are a daring adventurer in search of precious gems. That's all the story we're getting. There's just you and a linear sequence of 100 levels, with the option to save between them. A warp is available, but it only works in increments of 10. I got to level 30 or so for this video, and I largely enjoyed myself. There's a whole ton of user-generated content available online. The main feature of Jetpack is, well, your jetpack. Once you collect some fuel, you'll be able to fly, making verticality a non-issue. Aside from all the obstacles and enemies in your way, of course. Fuel comes in single and double packs, and is spent whenever you hold down the thrust key. When you run out of fuel, you'll fall back to jumping, which gives you just enough lift to clear exactly one block. Due to the way some levels are designed, running out of fuel at the wrong moment can and will trap you. Turf comes in two forms, destructible and indestructible. These can then be topped with conveyor belts, ice or sludge. It almost feels like the variety of turf has regressed with time, as exemplified by the previous games. Blocks can also be partially destructible, making them diggable from certain directions. You heard me right! Your digging tool, called the phase shifter, can be pointed orthogonally in any direction. As the phase shifter never runs out of juice, you'd think that Jetpack offered you the most freedom as far as tunneling and digging go. But in practice, those pesky force fields, indestructible blocks and their partially coated variants are present in almost every level. Then again, considering the degree of freedom the game gives you, these are almost a necessity in order to build better puzzles. Jetpack does have invisible turf like in the previous games, but as it's generally a little more fast-paced, it feels like less of an issue. Instead, the arch sin of Jetpack is RNG. There are teleporters in the game, right? The thing is, if you step into a TP with more than 2 pads of the same color, you will end up at a random endpoint. There's a level filled with giant balls and TPs of the same color that will quickly highlight just how maddening this feature is. With creative use of force fields, some levels also introduce further randomness into the movement patterns of enemies. You also have enemies called flitzers, whose movement is entirely unpredictable. When it comes to enemies, Jetpack has no less than 8 types, easily eclipsing the 2 prior games with its variety. We've got an abstract assortment of threats that includes robots, balls, springs, missiles, and other even more bizarre entities. They all behave differently, so you'll need to vary your approach. Unlike in the previous games, you can permanently trap enemies in turf if it reforms around them. As far as the actual collectibles in the levels go, you only actually have to pick up all the green gems spread throughout the level. Other pickups like coins, vases and statues have no effect as far as opening the exit goes. Unlike in the other games, the exit is actually always visible, so you know where you need to go beforehand to finish the level. No guesswork needed. Similarly to DG2, Jetpack operates primarily on power-ups as far as player advantage goes. There's Jetpack Fuel, a shield that provides you with invulnerability, and a stunner that freezes all enemies. These power-ups can also periodically appear in a random spot. The gameplay feels smooth, and the game doesn't have the janky grid movement system of the previous 2 games. When taking into account the jetpack movement, multi-directional digging, power-up opportunities, and easy level warps, Jetpack feels like a much more streamlined gameplay experience compared to DG2 or TLR. Jetpack is nowadays fully freeware and can be downloaded from the game's website. If you're into these sort of games, I can easily recommend it. The sequel to the game, Jetpack 2, came out in Wait, when was that? Let's see here. 24 years later. Never played that one. Didn't even know it existed until now. The version on the dedicated site appears to be shareware, but it's in Flash and I couldn't get it to work. I tried asking around in the Jetpack Discord, but to no avail. There's also a Jetpack revival project, Jetpack DX, which is playable directly in your browser. Links to all three versions in the description. With our last game, we jump forward in time and take a look at what puzzle platformers might look like in relatively modern times. Here we are, over 15 years after Jetpack. Spelunky is a game by Mossmouth with relatively little to do with caving that came out in 2012, originally for the Xbox 360, and would be released for multiple other platforms in the following years. Here's the thing. We're not going to be talking about this version of Spelunky. We're going to be talking about the original version of Spelunky, made by this guy, Derek Yu. It came out 4 years earlier in 2008. What is it about? Take a look. The original Spelunky is delightfully minimal when it comes to any lore. You only have a small teaser in the intro sequence, which is randomized. We see an unnamed adventurer entering a tomb, dropping down into a chamber that acts as the main menu. The README only offers 2 sentences of flavor text.
Legends speak of a colossal cave that extends deep underground, so twisted by time that its passages shift like the sand under which it lies. The cave is said to be filled with fabulous treasures, but also incredible danger.
Spelunky takes inspiration from several games, such as La Mulana, Aztec, Balding's Quest, and perhaps most obviously, Spelunker. This game introduces many of the features that Spelunky would later re-implement. As always, you gotta reach the exit. Collecting treasure is no longer mandatory unless you want to beat your high score. The game imposes a time limit in the form of an oxygen meter, which steadily depletes with time. I kinda wish this was the inspiration behind DG2's time limit, so that everything would come full circle. Spelunker also has ropes and bombs present, which are a central mechanic in Spelunky in dealing with verticality. Unlike the overt oxygen meter in Spelunker, the time limit in Spelunky isn't visible. If you take too long in an area, the music will suddenly distort, and you'll be warned to head toward the exit. After a short while, the Ghost of Legacy Kane mechanics will appear and bore you to death if it catches you. In Spelunky, you start off with 4 bombs and 4 ropes. The most important purpose of bombs, in my experience, is to open up shortcuts in order to bypass otherwise dangerous areas. They can also be used to mine for treasure! Ropes allow you to reach elevated areas or particularly deep areas safely. There's also a plethora of items in Spelunky that you can find in chests, buried underground, or available at the shop. These are separated into passive items that slot into the UI and provide you with a constant benefit, and active items like guns, knives, and bows, which you need to hold in your hands if you want to use them. I'll mention the mattock in particular here, since it allows you to freely dig as long as it stays intact. In addition to items, you can hold objects such as rocks and skulls in your hands to throw at your enemies. Levels can contain golden idols, which nets you a large cash bonus if you can carry them to the exit. Alongside idols, damsels can be randomly found in levels. If you can bring one to the exit, she will reward you with a kiss on the next level transition, increasing your health. There are 4 biomes of 4 levels each in Spelunky: Cave, Lush, Ice, and Temple. Each has their own set of common and unique hazards. You can also encounter special biome-specific themes such as darkness, snakes, water, and even a UFO crash site. Interestingly, Spelunky takes a different approach regarding turf. All blocks are fully destructible, and we finally gotten rid of invisible blocks entirely. That's because the levels in Spelunky are procedurally generated, so you'd have no opportunity to learn by trial and error in the first place. Why are we talking about Spelunky though? It's described as a cave exploration / treasure hunting game with roguelike elements. Let me ask you a question. Is Spelunky a modern implementation of a puzzle platformer? There are a lot of similarities. Reaching the exit is the main goal, there are enemies in the way, there's treasure to be collected, platforms and verticality are present. Most importantly, there's digging and other ways to manage said verticality, but you can still get trapped, especially in the ice caves. We even have the same tradition of offering a level editor. There are differences though. The game is no longer confined to a single screen, your verticality management tools are limited, there's a shop where you can spend your treasure, you no longer die from a single hit, and there's fall damage. None of these things feel like too much of a departure, however, and more like what a natural evolution of mechanics might look like. The most obvious difference in my opinion is that you can no longer pre-plan your potential route like in the other games, since the levels don't start out paused, they have no map, and they're too large to fit into a single screen, as mentioned. Some levels even have a darkness mechanic, making navigation even harder. The sin of Spelunky is its
brutality.
Or as Derek likes to diplomatically word it, tension. Instead of a lives system, Spelunky gives you 4 health points to work with, represented by hearts. At first glance, this might seem like it would make things easier.
It does not.
Some traps and enemies can cause multiple damage points at a time, and you have no period of invulnerability between instances of damage. In fact, if you accidentally drop down from a great height and stun yourself, any enemy wandering over to you can potentially insta-kill you. Speaking of instant kills, those are a constant threat. Spike traps, boulder ambushes, pitfalls, booby traps, angry shopkeepers. The list is long and varied in its capacity to end your run. When you die,
and die you shall,
you are booted back to the starting chamber, where you can access the tutorial, begin a new run, or take a shortcut, provided you've interacted with Tunnelman. I remember completing a full playthrough from start to finish back in the day, and it only honestly takes about an hour. But for the purposes of this video, I used Tunnelman's services quite liberally. The original version is completely free to download and play, and works on modern systems. You can find the remake, sometimes called Spelunky HD, and the sequel, Spelunky 2, on store platforms like Steam. I haven't played Spelunky 2 yet, but I'm definitely putting it on my wishlist. You can even play Spelunky directly in your browser. As always, links in the description. It's definitely one of those games that you should put on your virtual bucket list and play at least once in your life. If you can look past the brutal difficulty, I think you'll appreciate the level of polish this particular gem has.
Fatality.
I wanted to bring these games up because collectively I've sunk a hefty amount of hours into these, and it was interesting to realize just how minute the differences between the games really were. The reaching the exit, collecting
Treasure!
digging. There are many different kinds of puzzle platformers out there. I specifically wanted to highlight digging because somehow it's close to my heart. I love how it allows me to potentially skip parts of the level and gain access to all kinds of goodies. I guess actual mining would be even better, but this is as far as I will go this time. What I also like about these games is their, how would I put this, their self-contained nature. You can fire up a game, play for a level or do a run, and then resume at a later date. There's no persistent state or plot points to keep track of. It's like doing a crossword puzzle, but with robots, undead monks, and marmots. Do you have a particular favorite puzzle platformer? I demand to know. Mention it in the comments below. In the next video, we'll be beating each other up as robots. Until then, have a nice day.
You know what? Treasure forever!